All right, so I'm going to go ahead and put this out there. Security, I'm going to need for Pastor Isaiah Hunter to be removed from the building if he yells at me one more time. It is so wonderful to be here in front of you this morning. I'm thankful to be here. How many of you all are thankful to be here this morning? Like, it could have been the other way. There are so many people right now this morning that wish they had the ability to get up and come in here and praise God. But you know what? For you who are online, we're going to praise him right with you, right? Y'all go ahead and sit down. You're making me nervous. Nah, I'm joking. I don't get nervous very often. Well, thank you so much, Pastor Campbell. Thank you so much. First Lady Kathy, thank you so much for thinking enough of me to be here this morning, to be to speak on something that I have lived for a number of years. Something about Pastor Campbell that I'll share. I'm going to give a little bit of background, and I got the mic, Pastor, by the way. But really quick, there's been multiple times over the past 20-plus years, Pastor, where you and I have known each other, and God led it on his heart to call me, and one of those days I was about to quit grad school, and I told you guys that story a couple of times, but he was in prayer that morning, heard my name, and called me because he was being obedient. And he and I had a conversation. What he didn't know when he called me, I was 5 minutes away from calling UNCW and quitting grad school. Just a lot going on, work, family, all that stuff. But I'm glad you were obedient because that changed your trajectory of where I am today. No joke, okay? And then Pastor Hunter over here, man of many hats. So a number of years ago, my wife and I we grew up in church. She's a preacher's kid. I grew up in a little small church just past Monkey Junction, and we were looking for a church home shortly after we got married, and I had reached out to a bunch of my fraternity brothers. I'm a Kappa, so we were just calling everybody like, man, where is this church that brother Zay goes to? And they're like, oh, that's New Beginning. It's over there on 17th Street. I'm like, well, what time does it start? He said, well, here's Isaiah's number. Send him a text. And you may not remember this, Isaiah, but you replied back, yeah, we're over on 17th Street. Church starts, I think at that point in time, it was like at 10 or so. And we came. And I knew the first time that I got there that would be a place where our family would land and put our roots. So, Pastor Hunter, I appreciate you answering the call, and I appreciate you making the call, and both of you all being obedient. It has made a huge impact on me as a man. And if you didn't catch it, my name is Patrick Boykin. I'm a little knobby-kneed kid from Monkey Junction. Glad to be here today. Thanks to my mom being here, my wife, and my in-laws. And man, Ryan and Rihanna, thank you for coming. I really appreciate it. It's good to see you. I think the children just got dismissed, but Jaredon and Jameson are here too. Bye, Jameson. Behave yourself. I know you can hear me. And I'm going to take a moment real quick to brag on my children. And Jaredon, you stand right where you are. Don't you go out that door, Jaredon. So, as parents, we put a lot into our kids, and we put a lot on our kids, right? And this past week was like the end of school, and we get a call like, hey, she's going to get a couple of awards. We're thinking like, okay, well, we know she's a scholar athlete, and so we show up for this stuff. But little did we know that she was being honored with the Principal's Award for the entire 8th grade at Murray Middle School. So I know you're trying to leave out, Jer, but baby, we're very proud of you. You're welcome. Oh my goodness, she's just like my wife. Boy, she does not like to be called out in public. I'll get in trouble for saying that one right there. But I think back to Ryan and Rihanna. Both Ryan is our oldest. He's 30. He was active in church as a youth. He actually used to help Eddie set up the flags on 17th Street and then wave at people as they were coming into church, right? And Rihanna was on the praise team for a number of years from high school through college. And so, when I got asked to speak about blended family, I'm like, man, I'm gonna be honest with you. I didn't know what blended family meant until I was in this church. Because growing up, you were just family, right? You had cousins that may have had a last name. It didn't matter to me, right? We were at the family reunion. Okay, well that's my cousin and that's their mom. That's my mom's sister. But it didn't register until I was older what actually blending a family meant. And so today, when I was asked to share this message, I was just like, okay, well, Lord, let me get down on my knees and pray for about a week because I don't know where I'm going to go with this one. But I was being obedient. I don't see Minister Fern here, but I chatted with her one day, and I told her what I was going to do. And she said, look, son, just let the Lord use you. You already know, so you just go ahead and do what you're supposed to do. All right, so, I'm going to pull a page out of Pastor Hunter's book and give the Merriam-Webster definition of what a blended family is. And I want you to listen very carefully to this because this is where I struggled to get ready for this morning. I'm being totally transparent and honest, but I think when we get to the end here, you see where I'm going. The definition, the Merriam-Webster definition of a blended family is a family that includes children of a previous marriage or relationship of one spouse or both, period. Not a good definition to me. Because in my experience, it could also mean or when parents adopt a child and bless them with being a part of their family. Or when, your aunt marries someone and they have another set of children. That's a part of your family. So growing up, a blended family to me that's just your people, right? You could be the Boykin family, the Hayes family, the Bowie family. All I know is you better not mess with any of us because if you do, you got about 30 people rolling up on you at any point in time of day or night. Just going to put that out there. That hasn't changed, by the way. And so, again, I want to say that being in a blended family is something that is new to me. And, I tell people all the time, I'll have friends at work, and I'll start talking about my children, and I talk about, well, Ryan works out at GE, and he's got a 4-year-old, and my oldest daughter, she just had a son, he's 7 months old, and they're like, wait a minute, you don't look old enough to have a child that's 30 and 28. And I start laughing, I'm like, well, if you don't think I look like I'm old enough to have a child that old, you ought to see my wife. Because she looks 28 herself. Thank the Lord. But then I get halfway offended, too. Because it's like, they'll make reference to my stepchildren. I'm like, wait a minute. No. There is no step in between me and my children. And you say that again, we're going to have another conversation. And that's a part of the blend. Like when we talk about blending things, it's like putting things together. When they're separate, they're not as strong, right? But sometimes some of the toughest alloys and metals on this planet are a blend of different substances, right? And we take for granted that, that's just steel. Well, steel is a blend of different things. And when you say something is as tough or as hard as steel, it's because it's blended. Well, that's how my family is. We're tough. We've been through some stuff together. We're going to keep going through stuff together. And that's what keeps us together as a family. And I'll share this with you. Being in a blended family, by definition, isn't always pretty. But here's the thing. If you look back on our history as a people, the blended family was a forced concept on us majority of the time, right? And so when you start looking back in our history as a people, this is really nothing new. But what it tells us, and I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand, but I would dare say that probably 95% of the people sitting in this room were either a part of a blended family, or your aunt or your uncle had a blended family, or your best friend came from a blended family. we've all been a part of a blended family. And the thing about us as fathers in this type of a situation gives us a very heavy responsibility. First thing we do is we go to God and we pray. Lord Jesus, I have prayed many a nights, some known, some unknown, to make sure that God covered all of my family, including my older children. So there's something I think about these dads that I've come in contact with over my life. One in particular was married, had a child outside of the marriage, and then his wife got pregnant. And so now he's balancing all of this stuff that he's responsible for as a man, right? So he's married. He and his wife didn't have children, so he had a child outside, what we call outside the family, right? And then there's another situation that I came in contact with where there was a man and woman who were engaged to be married. And this young lady got pregnant, and everybody was telling her, like, look, this is going to happen. You're going to have a child. But you need to be careful and be praying about what's about to go down. Really messed up situation, right? Father, the baby is born. Father accepts the child as his own because he knows God is in control. Well, we all know who those people are, right? The first family I explained to you was Abraham, okay? Father of many nations, right? God made him a promise that he would give him the seed as many as in the sky, the stars in the sky, right? Second family I gave to you was Jesus Christ. This is not a new thing to us as a group of believers, right? But in all of that, the thing to remember is that those men had to keep praying to God. And I think about Joseph. Joseph was raising the Savior of the world, right? The Savior of the world. God sent that child here, but most importantly, he sent Joseph to be his daddy, knowing that his father was in heaven. So as I kind of got ready for this, I kept thinking about, dads, fathers, we are here for a reason, beyond what we know in our own belief. Beyond what we think is right. It's what God has ordained us to do as men in our family, our immediate family, or other families. So as I'm thinking about this, there's some things I would tell you that as a dad, as a father, and women in the room, I want you to help our men and dads and fathers to do these things. The first thing in this blended family is that you got to be love. Not be loved, be love. Okay? So in Romans 15:7, I'm pretty sure many of you know this verse. It says, love each other deeply and accept one another as Christ has accepted you. That's love. That's the love that God has asked us to do as individuals. But most importantly, for us as dads in what we would call a blended family, we have to be love. So I remember one day I was driving our older children to school one morning, and this was shortly after Katrulia and I began dating. We were very serious. We were about to get engaged. I was driving them to school, and I looked back at them, and I knew it was God talking to me. I was like, I got to say this now because I don't know when I'm going to say it. I looked back and I said, hey, guys, I just want you to know something. I'm not here to replace your father. That's not my job. My job is to be the man that God asked me to be in your life. And I know there were, I think you guys were like 13 and 11 at the time, maybe 12 and 10. And it probably didn't register, but I remember the moment that God put it on me to say that to them. because I meant it. I was not going to replace their father, but I was going to do what God asked me to do in their life. But here's the thing about being love. Love isn't passive. You know, you can always say, oh, I love you, or, you know, sometimes it's a passive word that people use, and it's actually an action word. And you have to show your love with the actions that you take. Love isn't always going to be, you know, you giving people what they want, but it's helping them understand the value of love. And the love that you have for your wife or your husband, it's what's important to show to your children. The unified parenting that me and Katrulia have comes from something that's even more important than just us being there in the moment. It's more important than traditional marriage and where the children have the same mother and father. Our unified parenting had to double down because their father was not always present in their life. Now, I'll tell you this. Children may not be able to say they love you. They may not be able to say it. And that even happens in families that aren't blended, right? They may not be able to say it, but they're thinking it, but don't know, in a blended family, they don't know how they can love you like a father more so than their biological father, right? And that is a tough situation to be in for a 12, 14, 5-year-old, 30-year-old child. That is tough to deal with. So that's why I say you have to be love. Because they understand that. They understand that person loves me for who I am and what I'm doing. And when I say that it's not passive, there's some times where you have to put your foot down, fathers, dads, to let them know just how much you love them. Like the day that a teacher made a sideways comment about Ryan. And it was not a question. I got in my car, I drove straight to Ashley High School, and I looked her eyeball to eyeball. I said, now what did you say about Ryan? Ryan, you may not even know this story. I loved him so much, I was willing to leave my job and dare somebody at that bank to say something to me while I was on my way to take care of business with my child. That's the love I have for my children because of what God told me to do. Not because I was married to their mom, but because God told me, you better get down there and see about your child. And I did that. And I think I became a legend at that school that day. That's what they tell me. I've heard it twice since then. And depending on their age and stage, it may take them a little longer to love you as their dad in this new situation, right? And that's okay. All in due time. But the only thing, dads, fathers, that you can do is be love. That's all you can do. And be steadfast in that. Don't move from it. Be love. And, you know, it led me to, you know, when I'm thinking about love, you know, you think about 1 Corinthians 13:4. Everybody knows this, but they only hear it at a wedding. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It's not proud. Folks, let me tell you, that verse was not just written for a marriage. It applies to everyday life. It clearly states what love is. And so when I think about being love in my children's life, I come back to that. It's patient. Doggone, it's got to be kind sometimes, even when you don't want it to be. But it's very clear for us what we have to do as dads. So it leads me to another thing that I would share with you about being a dad in a blended family is about being patient. A couple weeks ago, I was speaking with the children's church, a teaching children's church, and our verse or our subject for that week was about being patient. Proverbs 14:29. I know everybody knows this one. If you don't, come see me after church. He that is slow to wrath is of great understanding, but he that is hasty of spirit exalts folly. And in some words, it says, shows himself to be a fool, right? So that patience is one of the toughest things to have when you're a new dad in a family where you're not the biological father. And that patience is not just about you being patient with your children. It's about being patient with your wife, but also being patient with yourself as a dad in a blended family. So many of you know I played college basketball. And like for me, it was just, it's either you're going to score or not. You're going to win or lose. There's no in between. You can win by 1 point. I mean, just all that stuff, right? But with patience, you're going to lose, and it's going to feel like you're winning, but not really. And you're going to have to take your time and grow into a situation where it's brand new, not just to your children, but to you as a man, as a dad, as a father. As I mentioned, you got to be, patient with your wife, patient with your children, but most importantly, be patient with yourself. Because you know what? I made mistakes. You're going to make mistakes. But I'm going to revert back. Those mistakes were made because I was loving, but I was thinking on my own. I wasn't thinking through God, right? So there may have been some times that as a dad in a blended family, you may say the wrong thing. You may be thinking something else, but you say the wrong thing, and then it's taken the wrong way when actually you were coming from a place of love. And you got to, and now I'm sounding like more of a motivational speaker and instead of giving the word, but man, you just got to be patient with yourself and know you are gonna mess up. But stay prayerful and ask God to give you direction. Kids are always going to compare you and play you against each other. That's just the realness. Whether you're in a blended family or not, you are going to get played. Just ask Jaredon and Jameson, who are younger kids that we had through our marriage. They try to play us all the time. Dad, can I go fishing? No. Mom, can I go fishing? Yeah, go ahead. So it becomes very important to be patient in your thoughts, actions, or otherwise you will be made to look like a fool. All goes back to the word. I'm telling you, when I read Proverbs, it is amazing. Solomon asked for one thing of God. God came to him in a dream, says, what is it that you desire? And he said, wisdom. He could have asked for anything, and I believe God would have given it to him. But he asked for wisdom. Thank God that he asked for wisdom, because Proverbs really takes you back to some things that are everyday practical that we don't even think about on a day-to-day. It's amazing. I tell you, if you haven't read a good book, let me offer this one to you. This powerful stuff in the Word. Now, here's a little asterisk I'm going to give you about being patient. Be patient with the other parent. And I'm not talking about your wife or your husband. I'm talking about their biological parent, in this case, their father, that isn't there. For whatever reason, he's not in the picture. Good, bad, and different, that's fine. You let God deal with that, right? But don't forget they're not there for some reason. And it's not on you to judge them about that. So you've got to show them patience. They are going through things that you're not aware of. And quite frankly, it's none of your business. It's between them and God. So you have to show them some patience too. And you also have to show patience in a way that, I like to think about it. I see Bo over there. Bo, I'm sorry for calling you out, buddy. Bo Montgomery is one of the newest basketball players at UNCW. I'll tell a quick story about Bo in a minute. But when you're being patient, you can't force the play. You know what I mean? You can't force the play. You know what to do is right. You got defense coming up against you. The devil is saying, no, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that. Don't try to force it without the help of God. Prayer and God will help you make it through. So even in all of that, we're being loved, we're being patient, and it leads me to something that is probably the most critical and most important thing that we can do as dads in what we call a blended family, and that's to be humble. So you look at Colossians 3:13, put on therefore as the elect of God and the elect of God, holy and beloved, bowels of mercies, kindness, humbleness of mind, meekness, and long-suffering. And quite frankly, I think that long-suffering means sacrifice. Humble people put the needs of others before their own and seek to bring honor and glory to God. So in all of this love and being patient, in my experience, one of the most important things to remember is to be humble. And that humility means that you're willing to give yourself up for your family, not your kids through the marriage, not just to your older children, but your whole family. Showing humility is not letting yourself get puffed up and think that you're all important. Because some men will get puffed up and say, well, I'm married to their mom, and I'm here, and I'm doing them a favor by being here. Wrong. And if there's any dads out there online who are dealing with that, let me tell you, you're wrong. I hate to put it that way, but we can have another conversation. You're wrong. You may not think being humble is important, but it's one of the most important life lessons that you can show your family. So your humility is not just about your sacrifice. It's about what God has told you to do so that your family can learn how to do it also. Because guess what? One day it's going to be their turn. And if you, as a dad, have not given them the example on how to make it and how to do it, you're setting them up for failure. We talk about generations, right? And the things taught, they go down from one generation to the next and to the next. And I just think it is so important to show humility because God asks us to be humble, right? You show your family how to be humble, and I promise they will love you for it. Being humble enough to make sure that the other parent isn't being excluded, depending on the situation, is important too. That means you have to get outside of your comfort zone. Reach out to the other parent and say, hey, just want to make sure you know, we got graduation today, or we got graduation next week. Love to see you there. Or we're having a graduation party, or we're having a birthday party, or we're just having a party. You need to be present in their life because we don't want you to feel excluded. Now, here's the flip side of that. As a dad in a blended family, and this kind of goes back to the whole patience thing, you can't allow yourself to feel excluded, okay? So the situation may be, and I have to tell it this way because this is just the way that it is. So I love this about our family. Ryan is the oldest son, and he is this tight with his mom. Obviously, right? She gave birth to him. That is her son. He is her love. She is his first love, right? So me not being his biological father, I had to learn how to understand that their bond is tighter in a lot of situations than the bond that she and I will ever have. And it's okay. I would prefer that. Because if I'm not there, who's got her back? He does, right? And where I've seen dads in blended situations really mess it up is to let that situation make them feel like they're less than. And then it spirals into, well, you love your children more than you love me. Well, she's supposed to. Now, I will say, God has asked us as husbands and wives to love each other first and our children after, right? But as a dad in a blended situation, you got to get over yourself, man. You have got to get over yourself. It's not always about you. And I'm looking in the camera, whoever I'm talking to. It's not always about you. But guess what? It's okay. Because there are times where she's going to put you in front of all of the children, majority of the time. So don't get it twisted. It's okay for you to feel like that, but you've just got to know you're not being excluded. It's a balancing act. It is a tough balancing act. And when we think about blended families, it's all, we live in this society where the man has been put over so much that we forget that the greatest balancing act is with our wives. They have to balance all of that and support us in the things that we do as dads. But the key to that as a dad, you have to be able to talk about it with your wife. If you don't, it just leads to more tough situations to deal with. It is a fine balancing act. So one of the things that I wanted to have some fun with this, and Katria, she keeps, she's like First Lady. If I get too far off the rails, she doesn't have to do this. She just looks at me. Sort of like what a mom would do to a kid, right? Like, nah, you know what? I was out of bounds. I'll come back. But as I was preparing, we're all familiar with Beatitudes, but I like to think of these as the Be Blenditudes, okay? So bear with me for a second. So the first and foremost, you have to pray. And I actually had animation on these so they wouldn't all show up at the same time, but we're going to roll with it. You have to pray, right? That's obvious. Be loved, not be loved. You be love in your family, in that situation, because that is what is the most important thing in all families, love. Be patient. Be patient. Don't force the play. I think this time last year, Pastor, I was speaking during the NBA Finals, and I made a prediction that the Heat were going to win the championship. That was totally wrong, right? And I think about not forcing the play, and I think about my coach from college, who actually was the assistant coach at the Celtics the last time that they won the NBA championship. So guess who I'm picking to win the NBA championship? Celtics. Sorry for you Kyrie Irving fans out there. But being patient is about not forcing the play. You know all the right things to do. You've been given all this stuff through God. You know the word. You've got people around you that can keep you rooted, right? So be patient. Be humble. Again, your humility, your willing to sacrifice for the good of your family is important to your family. This one I love. Be present. Be present. I could do a whole sermon on being present. And when I was getting ready for this service today, I reached out to my oldest daughter, Rihanna, and I asked her for some words of advice, some things that I could share. And she mentioned something that really kind of hit me. It was just kind of like second nature to me when I was doing it. But she said, I appreciate the fact that you were always there. And I can remember her track meet when she didn't come in first. I can remember Ryan's football game. I can remember all the things where I was just there because that was my job. That's what God told me to do, to be there for my children, even before Katrulia and I were married. Being present sometimes is one of the most important things that we can do as parents. And think about your friends or your cousins or your relatives that may not have had a dad, but somebody stood in the gap and was present, right? So being present, I'm telling you, is very important. And Rihanna, thank you for bringing that back up because, man, I had forgotten about some of the times where I was present, but I did not forget the time that I went to the high school and sat in front of that lady, eyeball to eyeball. Okay. As you can tell, that was a raw nerve with me that day, guys. But in all honesty, I would do that for anybody's child sitting in here. Because we have to advocate for each other's children. It is not by mistake we're here as a family in this church. So when you think about blended families, this is the other thing, Pastor, and I'm getting amped now. When I think about blended families, like our church is a family, right? We're all different backgrounds, all different places on the planet. We all come here, but we're here as a family, and we're all blended together. And that's because of you. That's because of you. And I appreciate you for that. But you've got to, it just strengthen that, and I appreciate you for it. I'm going to get on. Be you. And be unapologetically you. God made you who you are for a reason. Don't back down from that. Keep it in check. Keep it in check. Be receptive of those around you who are saying, hey, man, you about to cross the line. You need to listen to me for a second. But don't be afraid to be you. You're made in a wonderful way, and God wants you to be who you are. The other thing that will share with me is build trust. Now, I had not thought about this. And again, Rihanna shared this with me. She said, it took her time to be able to trust me. And that trust is important. That ties back to our love, right? And I know Ryan felt the same. Ryan didn't have to say it. I knew it, right? And he was protecting his mom. They were protecting their mother. And I love the fact that they had to build their trust in me to be able to be their dad. Seek wise counsel is something I'll share with you also. One of my teammates, a guy named John Spann, he's actually a pastor in Charlotte. Really cool story about him. He's also in a what we would call a blended family situation. And I reached out to him and said, what advice would you give to people about being in a blended family? And no joke, almost verbatim, he'd sent me in a text what I had already prepared. So I know it was confirmation of what I was thinking and what I wanted to deliver, but I knew I could call him and he would give me what I needed to be able to come in front of you today. Funny story about John. John is from D.C. area, and we were on a road trip one weekend when we were in college. He gave me this tape. He's like, here's some music to listen to, and it was some D.C. music. And I'm just sitting there, and then the flip side of the tape, not CD, not stream, the tape. Flip side came on, and it was a service. His dad was a pastor. It was a service from their church. And I'll never forget it. We're riding back from James Madison, 20 degrees outside, snow, ice, all that mess. And then that came on, and the service was so impactful that I began to cry. I'm thinking about it now. It was there as a 20-year-old kid on a bus coming back from a basketball game where we got beat by James Madison by 32 points, that I realized that Christ can come into your life anywhere. Folks, and I'm sure Span will see this later, but I thank you for handing me that tape that night of the DC music. I'm not going to call the name of the music. It's go-go. DC go-go. But it was really there. Like, I grew up in church and I knew that Christ was real. I believe in God. But like, I cried for 30 minutes because of the message that was being delivered on that tape. And it reaffirmed for me that Christ can come into your life anywhere, anytime. And for those of you who are online and you're not quite sure of Christ being able to come into your life, I'm here to tell you, anywhere, anytime, just be ready. I'm not going to lie, I had trouble. I mentioned this. I had trouble getting ready for today. And one of the things I had the most trouble about had nothing to do with the word, had nothing to do with the message that I prepared. But this concept of the blended family is something that we just didn't talk about in our family. So when Pastor said last week, and next week, Patrick Boykin is going to be speaking on blended families, I'm looking at our youngest two, Jaron and Jameson. I'm thinking, we haven't talked about this, right? And so I'm teaching Jared how to drive. We're in the car the other day, and I said, so, I'm speaking next Sunday. And she said, yeah. So what are you speaking about? I said, blended families. I said, do you know what that is? And she said, well, yeah, I do. I said, okay, so what does it mean to you? And she began to explain it to me. But the most important thing that she shared with me was that Ryan had shared with them the dynamic of our family and just how special our family is. And I already knew Ryan had my back. I already knew it. But him being the father figure, the older brother, at that moment for Jared and Jameson, and telling them, hey, this is how our family's made up. You're my brother and sister. We just have different dads, right? And then later, Jameson, he just tells it like it is sometimes. I sat him down and said, hey, so I'm speaking at church next week about blended families. What you know about blended families? And he gave me a textbook definition of it, and I was like, so we're in a blended family. He's like, yeah, Ryan told me. So Ryan, thank you, because you took on the responsibility that wasn't asked of you to do, which is what they needed. And it was one of those things where it was like, okay, so when do you have a conversation with the younger two about the fact that, okay, we got a different last name, so what, right? But to them, that's just their brother and sister. There's no difference. And that's how we raised our family, to know no difference. And I tell you, it's just something else to see your older children take on the responsibility of mentoring and fostering your younger children. That's why I say, folks, we're tougher than steel. Put us to the test. You'll see what's up. And it may not be just us. It may be 20 other people from different directions that will come and let you know just how tough we are and just how strong our faith is in God. So I'm going to ask you to do something for me. Think about the dads that you had in your life. Not just your daddy, not just your father, but your dad. Your best friend's dad who stepped in the gap and took you to basketball practice, or took you on a 3-hour field trip with the school. They were there because they were God sent, plain and simple. They may have seen a blended situation in their lifetime and understood their importance of being present and being there, not just for you, but for someone else. And when you think about that person, over the next week, reach out to them and tell them thank you for being an example in their life or even your friend's life. And for those of us who have lost our dad, either recent or over a number of years ago, remember this. Pray to God and thank God for them. But then do this. Reach out to someone else who was a dad in your life through them. That's the reason why your dad did those things. That's the reason why that daddy figure in your life did those things, so it wouldn't just live with you, but you would repeat it and do it for someone else. Your dad and father figure showed you things and did things for you so that you could be a blessing to someone else. So I hope that, I wasn't going to come up here and try to, bring down fire, brimstone, and all that good stuff. I ain't there yet. And Pastor, I joke with you about being, a minister. We are all ministers, right? We all have to minister in someone else's life. I think about Bo. I told you I was going to call you out. So my family goes beyond my family. His shooting coach in Memphis, Tennessee is my best friend. I get a phone call one day, and he says, hey, you got this guy coming to Wilmington. His name is Bo. I'm a shooting coach here in Memphis, and take care of him. So what do you think I'm going to do? Take care of him. Because I watch my dad do this for other people. I watch other dads do the same thing for other kids. And so, Bo, anything you need, man, you got family here. All of us are your family. All of us. We bleed teal in this church. The drummer is a baseball player, and Coach Woods, if she was here, I'll call her out too. But, folks, I really appreciate you supporting. Pops Womack, thank you for praying for me last week. You've been a father for me. You've stood in the gap for me. You've shown me an example of what I need to do, not just for my own family, but other families too. Papa, my father-in-law is here, folks. This is very intimidating, by the way. He is a pastor. All right? Wait, let me correct myself. Katrie just gave me that look. He is a retired pastor. You hear that, right? But thank you for, number one, standing in the gap for me when my dad passed, and giving me the advice that I need to know to raise daughters. You raised 3 beautiful daughters. I appreciate you. Before I asked Katrillia to marry me, I talked to him first. The second person I talked to, he may not remember it, was Ryan. I asked him, I said, so what do you think? What would you think about me and your mom getting married? And his words were, I think that would make her happy, right? And he is that guy, man. He wants to make sure his mom is taken care of. And I value that, Ryan. And you keep doing what you're doing for your daughter. You're doing an exceptional job. And don't you stop being you. You be you. All the things that I've taught through today, you keep doing. You're showing an example for other people around you. And I love you. Well, folks, I thank you for allowing me to be here today. It probably won't be the last time I speak. Yeah, you heard Pastor Hunter over there. But I thank God. I just thank God for being here today. Like I said earlier, it could have been the other way. There's a lot of times in my life I look back and I'm lucky to be here. I'm lucky to have the parents that I had. I'm glad my mom is here. I'm lucky to have the dad that I had in my life. And now it's my turn to continue on. People say, oh, you're doing a great job. I'm like, no, I got work to do. I got that. That's that super humble side of me that just says, nah, you ain't perfect, buddy. You still got work to do. We all have work to do. So to the dads who are watching online today, 5 years from now, 20 years from now, looking at this recording, I hope that I've been able to share some things with you that will help you be stronger in who you are in a very sometimes challenging situation. But you can handle the challenge through all the things that God has already done in you and for all the people around you. So if you ever find yourself in a situation where you don't know if you can make it, I'm here to tell you, you can. You can through God, you can through prayer, and you can through the people around you. And maybe I'm even talking to my future self, right? I might be watching this 5 years from now and just having a rough day. You can make it. You can make it through God, through prayer, or through the people around you. Thank you.